think the president is basically trying. I think he's trying to focus more on how you manage this U.S. relationship. Obviously, the NEC had its meetings over the past weekend. Much time was dedicated specifically to looking at the international situation. And of course, within that, the U.S. plays an integral role. And in managing, I think, that relationship, part of the issue is how do you manage? Do you return the same type of rhetoric that has been coming from the US with a similar type of rhetoric from South Africa? And I think overwhelmingly measured heads are basically coming to the fore, and sort of sober way of managing that relationship. So it's about saying don't antagonize any further. If the US is looking to antagonize South Africa, it's not in South Africa's interest to further antagonize the US. Rather manage it in a different way, both internally through engagement with certain stakeholders, but also externally.
He spoke about how the world is changing, talking about Russia, China, and the United States of America, almost saying that the Trump's administration is trying to fight for the survival of the U.S. dominance.
Well, I think one could read it in a particular way. One could read it as the U.S. essentially trying to reconfigure the international political economy. And essentially, whether we're looking at your trade wars, whether we're looking at tariffs, whether we're looking at the U.S. going after its neighbors, its own allies, South Africa, it is essentially trying to reconfigure the international political economy, trying to bring back manufacturing through the use of tariffs. But also the U.S. is also looking at trying to reconfigure its own security supply chain networks. Whether it succeeds or not is another question. But for us, it's about trying to minimize our exposure to the negative positions that have been taken towards us, utilizing groupings such as the G20, such as BRICS. But more importantly, South Africa will be resilient if its relations within the African continent are solidified. And so I think the main thing is don't overly focus on the US and what the US is trying to do. Rather emphasize your priorities, your national interests, your African agenda, consolidate ties with the global South, and including middle powers within Europe, the Nordic countries. That is what the task for South Africa is. Because at the end of the day, if we overly focus on the US, you could find yourself being distracted from your overall priorities and find yourself reacting to everything coming from the White House.